Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 4th of March, comes to you from London. And we see the dollar climbing again, so it's been strong these last few days. That's putting it back into short-term bullish territory. We were wavering a little bit on this medium-term chart, but the long-term chart is still bullish. And so now we're back into short-term bullish territory, looking back to this target of 99.77 on the dollar index. That's about 3.33% higher. So that means that the euro is lower against the dollar. We saw that falling away on Friday. And so we're back into bearish territory on all three time frames for the euro. So weaker euro, stronger dollar. Looking at the yen, we're seeing the dollar stronger here as well. Just down a little bit this morning, but holding that bull trend. And interestingly, now the medium-term trend, which we haven't seen for several months, now starting to look a little bit stronger. Ever since this Fed announcement of not putting up rates, we saw a little bit of fall away on the dollar at the end of last year, but now we seem to be recovering that composure. We've got upside targets here, neither of which are activated on the long-term chart against the yen, but the short-term target another 1% higher, which would lead to activation of those targets. Looking at sterling holding quite strong against the US dollar. Certainly in the medium-term chart looking very good. The long-term chart was still bearish, and the short-term chart were just coming off against that stronger dollar. We still do have these big downside targets hanging over us, and we've got some quite big upside targets, 3 and 6% higher. So it's all really now about Brexit. Whichever way it goes will define which way sterling moves. Against the euro, we're seeing sterling looking pretty strong on all three time frames, and against the Swiss franc, they're looking quite strong as well. And against the Aussie dollar, sterling looking strong there too, holding on to its gains there. Bitcoin, we see down 2%, so just continuing to fall. Really out of favor generally. US stock market went up on Friday, so we saw the S&P 500 index now quite clearly wandering out into this bullish zone on the medium-term chart. Just a shortage of medium and long-term upside targets is the key. We do have some short-term targets here of 2 and 4%, so it does look like we could go higher. But this has been quite a long time for a short-term trend to last, so don't be surprised to see some retracement and unwinding of that trend. We just need to watch the 60-minute chart. The same's true of the Nasdaq. We've got quite good upside targets here on the short-term chart, so there has been quite a bit of buying off the lows there. And the Dow similarly still holding its bull trend as well. The Russell 2000, the broader-based index, also looking reasonably good, so it just shows that the recovery is fairly broad-based. Seeing the futures this morning, we've got the S&P future up 1/3%, and the Nasdaq E-mini up 0.5%. So it does suggest the US markets are going to open higher again today. The Footsie 100 index up about 1/3% this morning, still in bearish territory on the short-term chart, unlike the US markets, but still recovering a bit this morning. And of course, if the US markets power ahead, then we'll see that falling back to Europe. The Footsie 250 hasn't had that bearish move, so its stronger sterling suggests that that's what's holding back UK blue chips. The DAX in Germany is up slightly this morning, still holding on to its bull trend, and again emerging into the medium-term bullish zone, so looking quite good there. And if we look at the CAC 40, also holding on up 0.6%. This has been the stronger market amongst European markets for the last several months, and we're seeing this just powering on ahead there, so that's looking quite strong. Tokyo, we saw the 400 index up 0.8%, so stocks generally higher there. Weaker yen will be helping, and also looking at the Hong Kong index up 0.5% there, so looking pretty strong too. And China holding on to its gains with another 1% rise, so it really does look like China might have come off the bottom. Remember last year we were saying we were worried about China, went from 3,500 to 2,500 on the Shanghai index. Looks like we're starting to see that recovery now. We might hit some resistance on the long-term chart, but medium and short-term quite good. We've got a 16% upside target on the short-term chart, but it is a lone target. This big thrust here will give us an upside target, and we've already unwound one of the downside targets, so that is quite a good sign that China might well have seen the worst. The Sensex in India are up 0.5%, just taking it back into short-term bullish. Obviously, there were worries last week about the India-Pakistan skirmish, but it looks like the market is shrugging that off. The S&P Australian index, the 200, is looking quite strong, up again this morning, up 0.4%. So we are seeing a good start to the week in Oz. And then taking a look at commodities, we see Brent crude is up 1% this morning, so still in short-term bearish territory, but this is the time of year where we do expect that recovery in Brent, so we shouldn't be surprised to see it back into short-term bullish territory. WTI also up just under 1% this morning, and not quite back into bullish territory there on the short-term chart. US nat gas sitting steady at $2.84. Really has been quite flat for the last few weeks, having had that massive spike at the end of last year, so not a lot of change there. Gold fell away very heavily on Friday. We're back below $1,300, so that stronger dollar really having an impact there, unwinding, but we still have had quite a lot of move, and we're seeing here with just this confusion within the cloud. Did we break out slightly back into the cloud? So it will be interesting to see how this plays out, but at the moment it's medium-term bullish, short-term bearish. We do have a downside target of 12.89, and we're just poking through that this morning, so through the resistance support level there. So does look like we're just falling away there. Keep an eye on the 1-minute chart for targets. Silver also looking bearish as well, as you might expect on that short-term chart. Just interesting, coming back to the gold chart, we do still have these upside targets in place on the 60-minute chart. If we move below this 1280 level for anything more than an hour, then we unwind that target. That will be significant, so just keep an eye on that. 1280, a move below 1280 is not good for gold. Looking at US 10-year yields, they're up quite sharply actually over the last few days, and we're sitting at 2.76%. We've got a target of 282, so looks like we might have just seen a little bit of a bottom in bond yields there on the 10-year, and we're finding some support, so it'll be interesting to see how we recover from there. German bonds weaker as a result of those stronger yields on the short-term chart, so that's interesting seeing that playing through. Taking a look at some of the stocks, so that data was all coming from Thomson Reuters Icon or Metastock Zenith, whichever you're using. The Metastock is the private investor product of the Thomson Reuters Icon system. So taking a look at world indices, we see it's mostly green. We had the US up, and then we've got Europe also looking quite strong. So looking stronger this morning just all round. Taking a look at the US stocks individually, on Friday we saw Chevron with a big leader up 2%, Nike up 1.9%. That's taking them to a new all-time high. That's of course very bullish when we see new highs. We only had 4 stocks in the Dow down on Friday, so that's looking pretty strong across the board for the US market. Taking a look at the Nasdaq bellwethers, we had Alphabet, which is Google of course, we're up nearly 2% there. Amazon was up 2% as well, and looking stronger all the time. Apple holding on to its support position, up only 1%, but still pretty strong performance. And then Facebook was also up just 0.5%, so interesting to see there. Looking at the Aussie market overnight, we saw Bellamy's up another 12%, so that's really starting to look like quite a good recovery there through the medium-term chart, and got some long-term upside targets there. And here we see the relative just starting to turn as well. Looking at the others, we've got Bingo Industries up nearly 9%. They've had terrible falls lately, so it hasn't really changed the chart very much. And Fortescue Metals looking very strong indeed, having seen that recovery through. So, and their relative chart looking really good. I've rebased these relatives to the start of this year now, so this is an outperformance so far this year, some 26% outperforming the Dow Jones Index. That's quite significant. Taking a look at Evolution Mining, down 5%. They still in the bull trend, but just falling away here, and that's a little bit worrying. And then Linus Corporation down 5%. China, we mentioned that was looking very strong. There were a handful of stocks down. These were they, not many there, about 6-7 stocks. On the upside, we had stocks as high as 3%. On the Indian market, looking at the Nifty 50, we had Z Entertainment. They were up 4% today, so that's quite significant. We're seeing quite big moves there. Hindustan Petroleum up 4% as well, and that's certainly certainly taking the chart looking more bullish on the medium term, long term still bearish. We've got good upside targets there. Taking a look at the downside, there are about 10 stocks to the downside. Marathi Airtel, they've had a really terrible time. The chart still looks pretty bad, and they were down a further 3%. So quite interesting there. Taking a look at the European markets now, we'll start with the Footsie 100. Looking at performance here, Rightmove up 4.3%. That's a very strong showing today, and that's looking quite good here on the long-term chart. Rightmove looking like a good recovery. Got upside targets here of 24% on the long-term chart. We've got upside potential of 53 and 74%. This one, of course, not activated. 24% is the next real upside target. Quite good support here, and this downside target actually not activated. So that's a significantly interesting chart. Looking at NMC Health, they're up 2.6%. Looks like they're finding support on the long term. The medium term still has work to do here. So, and they have been underperforming on the relative, and no signs yet of that turning. So it's probably a little bit early there. WPP, they've been in the news lately, and they are still looking pretty bearish on the chart. Have been for some time. Taking a look at the downside, we've got IAG, British Airways, as was, looking a bit more bearish after quite strong results last week. The market really now starting to take that in a stride, turning into long-term bearish charts. So that's actually not looking good. Underperforming the market already this year by 11%. So they haven't really participated in the recovery. Rolls-Royce, similarly, they are still in bull trends here, but we are seeing again, we're just seeing a little bearish. Here are the live prices coming in from Yahoo. I've got my system set up every 1 minute to just pull in the price. So I've got the latest price on the chart. EasyJet down 1% in sympathy with IAG, I'm guessing, so that's looking a little bit more bearish as well. Taking a look at the 250 stocks in the UK, the mid caps, we've got Metro Bank. They were down heavily last week. We've seen a little bit of a recovery here, 4.7% up this morning, but that is really a falling knife. They've underperformed the market so far this year by half, so they really haven't done very well at all. Energen, oil and gas down 4.5%, but the chart looking actually quite strong. Super dry, they've been in the news a lot lately, but looking a little bit better as well. Not enough to really end the downtrend. And looking for the worst performers, we've got Synthomer down 8.6%, so they're falling away, and the chart looks terrible as well. Taking a look at the European market, we see here we've got various stocks rising here and looking pretty strong on the top of the board there. Bayer up 1.3%. And then if we look to the downside, we see we've only really got a handful of stocks on the downside. A whole group in Holland, probably the worst performer, down 3%, but the chart's still looking pretty good with upside targets. That's it for today. Keep an eye on those shorter term charts. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.